In early 2024, Norfolk Southern announced it had lost 4,200 frontline employees in a single fiscal year. One company. 1 year. They are not alone. Across the United States, 38% of all rail operating and maintenance staff are now over 55, racing toward retirement with almost no one behind them. This is the industry that moves 40% of America's freight, and it is losing its workforce faster than anyone predicted. The question now is not whether the damage will reach you. It is whether anything can stop it. Every day, nearly 2 billion tons of freight move across the United States, and almost half of it travels by rail. From grain fields in the Midwest to chemical plants along the Gulf, trains haul the raw materials and finished goods that keep factories running, store shelves stocked, and ports humming. According to the Surface Transportation Board, railroads account for about 40% of all freight tonnage in the nation. That is more than trucks, barges, or pipelines. It is a system that links every region, silently underpinning the economy, even as most people rarely notice it. Passenger rail, though smaller in scale, is just as vital for millions. In 2023, Americans took around 125 million trips by train, relying on Amtrak and commuter lines to get to work, school, or family events. For cities like Chicago, New York, and Boston, these trains are arteries of daily life, easing the load on crowded highways and offering a lifeline for communities beyond the reach of airports or interstates. When the rail network falters, the impact ripples far beyond the tracks. Delays in freight shipments mean factories cannot get parts. Retailers face empty shelves, and food prices spike as crops pile up in distant silos. A single missed connection in a rail yard can cascade into multi-day slowdowns across entire regions. For passengers, train cancellations leave thousands stranded or forced onto already congested roads. None of this happens automatically. Behind every locomotive, every loaded container, and every on-time arrival is a workforce of engineers, conductors, yardmasters, and maintenance crews. These are the people who keep the system moving, often in harsh conditions and on unpredictable schedules. The scale of their responsibility is enormous, and the cost of losing them is measured not just in economic terms, but in the daily lives of millions. The question is, with so much at stake, why is the industry struggling to hold on to the very people it needs most? Nearly 4 out of every 10 rail workers in the United States are now 55 or older. That number, 38%, signals a demographic cliff few industries face at this scale. The workforce that keeps the railroads running is aging out, and the clock is ticking. In rail yards across the Midwest, on main lines stretching through the Rockies, veteran conductors and engineers are turning in their keys at a rate that human resources departments cannot match. The Association of American Railroads projects that 30,000 retirements will hit by 2030, concentrated among those with decades of hard-earned experience. For someone like Ed Martin, a conductor with 42 years on the job, retirement is not just a personal milestone, it is a warning. He started in 1982 when every train crew had a mix of rookies and old hands. Now he looks around the break room and sees fewer familiar faces each month. Ed says, "You can't replace 40 years overnight. There are things you learn out here that you can't just teach from a manual. The loss goes beyond numbers." Senior conductors and engineers carry the unwritten rules: how to read the track by feel, how to spot a problem before it becomes a crisis. Their departure drains the system of memory and judgment, leaving gaps that new hires, no matter how eager, struggle to fill. Human resources managers admit the hiring pipeline is lagging far behind. Training a new engineer takes up to 18 months, but the queue of retirees grows longer every quarter. The age pyramid has become top-heavy, and the industry's slow response means every month lost is another month of institutional knowledge slipping away. For those still on the job, the pressure mounts. Fewer veterans mean longer shifts, more on-call nights, and less time to mentor the next generation. The urgency is real. If the retirement wave crests before replacements are ready, the railroads face a skills vacuum with no quick fix. And for Ed, watching friends hang up their vests for the last time, the question lingers: who is left to keep the trains running when the old guard is gone? Overtime has become a fact of life for rail workers. In just 2 years, average overtime hours climbed 22% across major Class 1 carriers. For many, the job now means 12-hour shifts, unpredictable on-call nights, and weekends spent waiting for a phone call that could come at any hour. The toll is visible in break rooms and crew hotels, where fatigue is as common as coffee. Voluntary resignations have spiked from 3 to 5% annually. It is an exodus not just of veterans, but of early career staff who once saw rail as a stable path. Jasmine Lee, a conductor in her late 20s, walked away after only 4 years. She describes missing birthdays, holidays, and entire seasons with her family. "The pay does not make up for the life you lose," she says. Her story is echoed by hundreds who leave before their 5th year, unwilling to trade personal time for a paycheck that now lags behind trucking and logistics rivals. Railroads defend the long hours as necessary, pointing to leaner staffing models and the need to control costs. But each resignation adds to the burden on those who remain, fueling a cycle of burnout that no overtime premium can fix. The industry's logic is simple: fewer workers mean lower expenses. Yet the human cost, measured in lost sleep, missed milestones, and mounting frustration, rarely appears on the balance sheet. Precision Scheduled Railroading, PSR, was pitched as the answer to rail's cost problems. At CSX, the plan meant cutting nearly a third of the workforce in just 2 years. Around 10,000 operating staff lost their jobs as management chased an efficiency model that promised leaner operations and better returns. Locomotives and rail cars were mothballed, yards were closed, and entire layers of staffing disappeared from the schedule. CSX was not alone. Union Pacific, Norfolk Southern, and others followed suit, slashing headcounts and consolidating roles. Each round of layoffs was justified as necessary to keep up with Wall Street's demands for higher operating ratios and fatter margins. The official line was simple: fewer workers, fewer costs. But the reality on the ground was far messier. Crews found themselves stretched thin, covering more territory with less backup. One union president put it bluntly: "They cut so deep there's no one left to call in sick. If you're not at work, the train doesn't move." The logic of PSR treated people as interchangeable cogs, but in practice, every lost job meant more pressure on those who remained. The relentless drive for efficiency reshaped the entire culture of railroading, and not for the better. As management celebrated shareholder gains, the workforce absorbed the fallout: longer hours, fewer breaks, and a sense that safety was becoming an afterthought. The question was not just how much money could be saved, but what was being risked in the process. 12% more derailments. That is the number federal investigators tracked on lines where crew levels were slashed by a quarter or more, an alarming spike that cannot be ignored. In the past 5 years, as Class 1 railroads cut deep under precision-scheduled railroading, the Federal Railroad Administration's incident logs began to tell a darker story. On routes where the workforce shrank by 25%, the rate of derailments jumped, far outpacing the national average. A Federal Railroad Administration investigator, Carla Mendoza, has spent 2 decades piecing together the aftermath of train accidents. She points to a pattern: fatigue-induced errors, missed inspections, and critical warning signs overlooked because there simply were not enough eyes on the track. She says you can't run a 2-person crew like you used to run a 5-person crew and expect the same results. Mendoza's field notes from a recent Midwest derailment reveal a crew that had worked back-to-back 12-hour shifts, with a single engineer responsible for both driving and troubleshooting mechanical faults. The data is clear. Where crews are stretched thin, safety margins evaporate. Overtime and exhaustion become routine, and the smallest slip can send thousands of tons of freight off the rails. Regulators warn that the current trend is not sustainable. Each incident is more than a statistic. It is a warning that the system is running on borrowed time. Congress stepped in with an unprecedented demand, a full federal safety audit of all major railroads. The call came just weeks after a near strike brought freight traffic to a standstill and left passenger routes in limbo. Lawmakers pointed to a pattern of accidents and crew shortages, warning that the industry's own cost-cutting had pushed the system to the brink. On the ground, union leaders sharpened their message. SMART-TD's national president, Jeremy Ferguson, did not mince words. He told reporters that you cannot run a railroad on skeleton crews and expect safety. Our members are exhausted, untrained replacements are being rushed in, and the public is at risk. The threat of a nationwide walkout still hung in the air. Bargaining tables turned tense as railroads insisted on more flexibility and unions pushed for minimum staffing guarantees. At the heart of the dispute was a simple question: who decides how many people it takes to run a safe railroad? For workers, the answer was clear. Fewer hands meant more danger. For management, every extra employee was another line on the expense sheet. As negotiations dragged on, both sides watched the next generation slip away. Apprenticeship classes sat half full. Recruitment fairs for engineers and conductors drew fewer applicants than ever before. The pipeline that once carried young workers into lifelong rail careers was drying up, with no quick fix in sight. The industry's gamble on leaner operations had triggered a backlash, one that threatened to unravel not just labor peace, but the future of rail itself. For a generation raised on flexible hours and work-life balance, the rail industry's pitch can feel like a relic. Early career operators like Marcus Torres, 24, talk about the appeal of steady pay, but the reality hits hard. Rotating shifts, little predictability, and a phone that can ring at 2 in the morning. Human resources recruiters say the drop-off is immediate. Applications from Gen Z candidates have fallen by nearly a third since 2019, even as other logistics sectors post hiring booms. The mismatch is cultural as much as practical. Younger workers expect time off for family events, mental health days, and a schedule they can plan around. Railroads, by contrast, still run on a seniority system where newcomers get the least desirable shifts and vacations are earned through years of service. A 2023 survey by the National Association of Railroad Human Resources found that 62% of applicants under 30 cited lack of personal time as their top concern. Recruiters try to sell the adventure and legacy of the job, but the message lands flat when compared to tech, trucking, or warehouse work that offers remote options or set hours. Marcus lasted just 18 months before moving to a delivery startup. He says he wanted a life, not just a job. The pipeline of new hires isn't just thin. It's leaking at both ends, and the gap is only widening. Automation vendors promise a future where trains run themselves. But on the ground, the timeline stretches far beyond the headlines. Even the most optimistic projections from rail tech suppliers put full automation more than a decade away. In the meantime, every new system still needs certified operators, signal maintainers, and safety inspectors, roles that can't be filled by software alone. Regulatory hurdles add months, sometimes years, to any rollout. One training academy instructor puts it bluntly: you can't swap out a workforce with code. Every new hire still needs 18 to 20 months before they are qualified. The numbers back him up. Nationally, only 68% of academy seats are filled, and the rest go empty for lack of applicants or funding. The waiting list for apprenticeships has ballooned to 450 in some regions, while the number of qualified graduates lags far behind retirements. A skeptical yard operator points to the gap. You can't run a railroad with a third of the seats empty. No amount of automation covers that. The academy bottleneck is a hard stop for quick fixes. Even if every slot were filled tomorrow, the industry would still face a years-long lag before new workers hit the field. The result is a capacity deficit that deepens with every missed recruiting cycle. Overseas, some rail systems have managed to keep their pipelines flowing. But in the US, the gap between tech dreams and training reality only widens. Germany's Deutsche Bahn manages to keep its vacancy rate below 5%, even as retirements rise, and the workforce shrinks by 4% over the last decade. The secret isn't a mystery. It is a steady pipeline of apprentices, dual training programs, and government-backed incentives that keep new operators coming in as older staff cycle out. In Japan, the JR Group faces a different demographic challenge. Nearly a quarter of its workers are over 55. Yet turnover remains low. The system relies on a culture of lifelong employment and a gradual, managed reduction in headcount, just a 1.5% drop since 2014. China, by contrast, runs the world's largest rail network with a workforce of 1.8 million. Only 12% are over 55. Thanks to aggressive hiring campaigns and rapid expansion of high-speed lines. But automation and relentless growth have still driven a 2% annual reduction in staff. International labor analyst Dr. Akiko Mori draws a clear line. Where the pipeline is strong, capacity holds. Where it is weak, even the best technology cannot fill the gap. The lesson is simple. Systems that invest in people weather the storm. Those that do not fall behind. A shrinking rail workforce doesn't just thin out the crew rooms. It puts hard limits on how much freight the system can actually move. The numbers are blunt. For every 1% drop in rail employees, the industry loses about 0.4% in freight ton miles. That's not a theory. It's a pattern tracked across years of Surface Transportation Board filings and internal carrier reports. In practice, when headcount falls by 1,000, the network sheds enough capacity to stall hundreds of trains each month. Shippers feel this squeeze first. At a plastics plant outside St. Louis, logistics manager Carla Benton describes a new normal of missed pickups and unpredictable delivery windows. She says they used to get daily service, and now it's 3 times a week, if they're lucky. Each missed train means raw materials pile up, production lines idle, and contracts teeter on the edge of penalty clauses. Across the country, manufacturers, farmers, and retailers echo the same story. Fewer rail workers mean delayed shipments, tighter inventories, and rising costs passed down the line. The risk is systemic. With every percentage point lost in the workforce, the whole supply chain grows more brittle. The regression isn't just a statistic, it's a warning that the margin for error is vanishing. For rail customers, the difference between a full crew and a short one is the difference between meeting demand and missing it entirely. If the trend continues, the economy's backbone could start to buckle under its own weight. Today, the rail industry stands at a breaking point, moving over 2 billion tons of freight and 1 billion passengers each year, yet bleeding skilled workers faster than it can train replacements. As labor shortfalls ripple through supply chains and daily life, the stakes are no longer theoretical. If the system fails, we all feel it. The question now is, who will keep the trains running tomorrow? Share your thoughts below.